Now eventually, I do have plans to do a video about the mail-away Boba Fett, the infamous Rocket Fett, etc., etc. But I'm waiting on something to arrive, so before I get into that, let's talk about the next mail-away that came up for a different character from The Empire Strikes Back. Now here's the curious thing. At first, they didn't even call the character by name. On the backs of the cards, it just said, secret action figure from The Empire Strikes Back. Eventually, thanks to the TV commercials, and I think later versions of the card backs, we learned his name.
At participating stores, you can check specially marked packages for details on how to get the secret figure. New Bossk, alien bounty hunter. Not available in stores yet.
But we didn't know anything about him. A bounty hunter from The Empire Strikes Back. Well, we'd heard the word bounty hunter before in the holiday special. I see why they call you the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. Well, we know Boba Fett's a bounty hunter, and this guy Bossk is a bounty hunter. Well, you can kind of start making connections. Now, John brought this up in the video over at his apartment, talking about how the costume was recycled from Doctor Who.
You got that down?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
It was actually recycled from a previous film before that. And it was in the cantina scene in Star Wars, at least the actual piece of clothing that the actor was wearing. The head for Bossk was a different character from the cantina. And so for The Empire Strikes Back, they just threw that and that together and put some new hands on it and some new feet on it and created this new throwaway character. Funnily enough, years later, you find out the action figure was even recycled. They took the wax sculpt for the Blue Snaggletooth and turned it into the wax sculpt for Bossk. It really was maximum existing resources being put to use by Lucasfilm to make this character, being used by Kenner to produce the figure. But as a kid in 1980, 10 years old, none of that stuff mattered. That's 4/5 of my life ago. Bossk was awesome. He was a bounty hunter. You know, he kicked major butt. You see, in the 70s, our minds were fertile. We would come up with our own adventures with our toys. It didn't matter that there was one single 2-hour movie to draw from, well, and the holiday special. That didn't matter. It was enough to stoke the fires of creativity. And the day that mine arrived, we checked the mail and immediately left to go visit some friends of my parents. So I had no other Star Wars toys for him to interact with the first day that I had him. I'm headed out to where these folks lived at the time, a place called Donegan Slough, which you might have heard me mention in another video. Now I had difficulty finding this place the other day because I don't remember there being houses here in the 80s. I think this was all a wooded, straight approach to the road that their house is on. This is the point where it starts looking a little more familiar to me. That looked a lot different back in the day. For one, I don't remember any of these trees being right here. Now I'm pretty sure that's the house, but that garage was not there in the 80s. And I thought this barn was huge, but kind of like they say in the movie Hook.
I remember you being a lot bigger. To a 10-year-old, I'm huge.
This all looked completely different when I was a kid. There was a big wooden fence here. There were actual horses that lived in a field, a plowed field. Horse's name was Thunder. And one day we had to hide from the young boy in the family the fact that Thunder had died that day. First thing he said, I was brought along to distract him. First thing he said was, "Where's Thunder?" So they also had a huge Great Dane named Tara that terrified me. And Craig one time came and visited me. But I thought I lost my Bossk in what's now a beautiful grassy yard, but at the time was a plowed field. And I thought, wow, I've lost him the same day he arrived in the mail. Freshly churned dirt and sod of the field, I made a play environment for Bossk. There was a main entrance. There was an interior chamber. There was even a secret escape hatch. I decided to completely roof the thing with tree branches and yet more sod. And at some point, looking for more sod, I turned around and realized I had no idea where the thing was. I'd camouflaged it entirely too well, and I pretty much almost had to step on it in order to find Bossk again. It's such a vivid makeshift playtime memory for me that I even fashioned an homage to it sometime after we moved into this house, using a T-section of PVC piping and some expanding foam insulation. So yeah, I'm sure at some point the plan was to put some fabric panels over the openings to sort of duplicate the effect of the sod from when I was a kid, but I never got around to that. So it still looks very much the way it was when I just grabbed a remnant T-shaped piece of plumbing and PVC. You can see the T-shape there, and just sprayed some Great Stuff expanding foam insulation onto it. And at some point I dropped sand onto it, trying to give it a different texture than the lumpy, rocky look that this has. Maybe going for a Tatooine motif at that point, I'm not sure. So that's just sort of been kicking around in this same format ever since. Now the Bossk that I've been using in this video up to now is not my original. This is my best looking one. So he's the one that goes into the Darth Vader case for The Empire Strikes Back. I have a few more. I've bought him many times over the years whenever I would find a cheap one. I don't think I did that many mailaways, but they each have like something subtly different about them. This guy's legs aren't even. This guy might be my first one. I don't think he is. The toes are kind of scrubbed in a familiar looking way though. And then this guy looks pretty good. He could be backup number 2. He's got a discolored place on the back of his leg there. Now this one though is slightly different from all the others in the detail of these black rings around the shoulders. All the rest of them just have a single ring painted. He has 2 rings painted on each side, and it goes all the way around to the back. So he's different, different enough to hang on to, and he's got a discolored place right here on his upper leg that will not scrape off with my thumbnail today, so I don't know if that's a recent thing or if it's some plastic deterioration that I've known about for a while. But anyway, I've got a lot of Bosks. I also have the one that I recently turned into a custom Cantina Dude figure using the arms and legs of a Luke from the X-Wing pilot version and the head of a Bossk figure. Who's your tailor? I love that outfit. So yeah, these guys are kind of dressing alike when they go to the cantina apparently. And I've got the leftover pieces of that Bossk here in a Ziploc baggie along with Luke's head and torso. These have now become custom fodder to use in some other future project that has yet to occur to me. I have one other Bossk. Now this case is not one of my Vader cases. It's a hardware case. It was either my dad's that I appropriated, or I bought it specifically to help me with some Star Wars figures that I didn't want to put into Vader cases because a lot of these guys were customized from vintage toys, but their paint jobs were acrylic, and then I sprayed them with a sealant. And I don't know if you can see that, but this sealant stayed tacky for a long time, so it picked up a lot of dust and things. So I wanted something that kind of held these figures a little more loosely. And in here, we have a Bossk that I customized, who may very well be the very first Bossk from this story. This may have been the guy that I got in the mail, and then as he got scuffed and things, I decided to use him as custom fodder. And what I did was give him a paint job closer to the image that you saw in some Kenner catalogs and things, where he had additional details here and here. And then I had to touch up the paint on his arms and his feet, so that's a little bit too dark. I'm colorblind, so I don't always get things exactly well matched, but you can see that's a little bit darker. And then I went ahead and painted the toenails too, and the claws. So yeah, this is one of my customized figures that is very possibly the one that I received in the mail that day back in 1980. Of a similar milieu is a Hoth Han that I customized to look more like the Kenner artwork that they had back in the day. There were actually several figures that looked different in the Kenner catalogs from how the production figures looked. They just had additional paint apps that I guess Kenner phased out at some point in order to cut down on costs. So Bossk looked different, the Imperial Snowtrooper looked different, Hoth Han Solo, FX7, IG-88. All these guys had subtle differences between what you saw in the catalog and what you actually bought in the stores. The sculpt was there, but they pulled back on the paint apps. So sometimes when you're customizing, you go, I'd kind of like to see what that looks like. Hold that in my hand. Now, I've accomplished everything I originally set out to do with this video, telling you about Bossk and thinking I lost him and finding him in the dirt. But something curious happened in the actual creation of this video, because when I went back to that house out on Donegan's Slough and stood there, spontaneously the first thing that I talked about was the day that Thunder the horse died. And in the editing of this video, I started realizing, wait a minute, I think those two stories may have originally been just one story. I think that's the same day, because I have no other memory of all the times I visited that family at that house and played in the house, played in the yard, played down at the pier, everything. There's not a single other memory of being in the field in front of the barn, because you would avoid that because of the horse, right? So I called my mom last night, who knew this family much better than I, and I got some facts and figures here. She was remembering that the son was in play school, which tracks with his approximate age. He was born about a month before Star Wars came out in '77, so he would have been about 3 in 1980. I told her it would have to be prior to May of 1980 when The Empire Strikes Back came out, because all the advertisements for this was like upcoming figure from the upcoming movie, you know. And the daughter of the family was born at the end of 1980. Matter of fact, I just noticed she has the same date of birth as my first wife, which probably explains why I didn't get along that very well with either of them. But the mom of the family was 34 in 1980, about 3 years younger than my mom. And so we're thinking she was expecting with the daughter at the time. And that morning, okay, so she tells her husband repeatedly that he does not need to go out of town on this business trip because that 22-year-old horse of his is about to die. He leaves, and the next day the horse dies. But the horse dies leaning up against the barbed wire fence. I remembered it as a wooden fence. I think I was remembering the vertical wooden posts, but it was horizontal barbed wire. And this is Mom recounting the story to me. Then, so the mom kind of hides it from the young son as she takes him to his preschool. But as time is going on, the weight of the horse is causing the barbed wire fence to slowly sag, and now he's at an angle, and it's becoming obvious that the horse is no longer among the living. So she gets back from taking him to preschool and calls my mom. And Mom thinks she might have called so early that Mom just decided to keep me out of school that day. Either that or I was playing hooky. We don't know what time of year it was. But anyway, I was older, but I wasn't at school that day. He was younger and he was at school. But so Mom says that they had a garden put in the pasture of the field in front of the barn. That it was actually a little further out from the barn, so that's why I'm kind of picturing it here-ish and then just sort of being dirt up against the barn. But there was hay, cucumbers, squash, and green beans were what they were growing out there, and it was Mom and the mother of this family and a third friend of theirs that had kind of gone in on making this little garden together. And the mother of the family had the brilliant idea in her panic of draping Viz Queen over Thunder. And as Mom's telling the story to me, she says, but you can see through Viz Queen. So that wasn't a good enough solution, and she was trying to call various people that she knew that would have equipment that could move a horse's cadaver and or dig a hole big enough to bury a horse. So all these families, my dad, their dad, various friends of the family, all were these construction type folks that had access to this equipment, but they were all on sites at the time. So nobody could shake loose that day and get it done before, like, he only went to preschool for 3 hours. The decision was made, we'll all go pick him up from preschool, and maybe my presence will distract him from noticing when we come back. But that's my job in the car, is to keep him not looking in the field of the horse that you had to pass to get to the driveway, you know. And so I remembered it as him looking at the empty field that we'd already gotten the horse taken care of, and he was not there anymore. And the young man saying, 3 years old, going, "Where's Thunder?" But Mom's memory of it was that they had not been able to come get the horse yet, which was why I was there to distract him. And that the thing the young 3-year-old asked was, "What's that on Thunder?" So just because he's got this Viz Queen over him and everything. So that story and the day that my Bossk arrived in the mail are apparently one and the same. To the best of our ability to reconstruct. That's the only time I ever played in that field, was while they were over there bustling around trying to drape stuff over and get that hidden. I'm over here with Bossk playing in the dirt of the garden that they had plowed. So, yeah. Rest in peace, Thunder, who died in 1980 and was 22 years old when he died, so don't feel too bad for him. And I should point out one other thing. The family in this story that owned Thunder the horse, well, the little girl was born at the end of 1980. When she was about 3.5, they invited me to go on vacation to Florida with them. Sort of like as a built-in babysitter so they could go out to eat a couple of nights. And I'd have been about 14 years old. And while we were on that trip in Florida, they picked what movie we went to see one night. A little film called Ghostbusters. And if you have not seen any of the other videos here in my Lex the Robot YouTube channel, prowl around and see whether or not Ghostbusters had any lingering effect on my life. The lights just flickered. There'll be 2 more in a couple of minutes. They always travel in pairs. Thank you for watching.